Good morning, trade professionals. Welcome to the Simply Trade News Roundup. We're back with some really good news articles. I have to say, this week, it seemed like it was a bit of a slow week for the trade world, or I'm not sure. I guess we came back from the bridge coming down and all that happening. So I feel like there's probably not much worse that is happening currently. But we found some articles, and this kind of is a special episode because we have Renee here in the virtual studio, I have to say.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I didn't want to botch the last name right now, and I was like, I'm just going to skip that one, but thank you, Andy. Yes, Renee, thank you for coming, because last time we had you on, and it was such a great episode, so really excited to have you back.
Thanks for having me. I'm lucky to be back. My second guest host appearance.
Woo! Yeah, can't wait. Well, and we obviously have Andy in the studio. Sorry, I have to. Don't want to forget him. But yeah, Lalo is out today, hence why Renee's in the office. So anyways, let's get back into trade. So we have the first article, and it is lawmakers press Biden to amplify scrutiny on Chinese biotech firms. So basically what this article is talking about is that lawmakers in the United States are urging Biden to enhance oversight of the Chinese biotech firms because there's growing concerns about national security threats. In a joint effort, the lawmakers from both sides of the aisle have sent a letter to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, urging the addition of 7 Chinese biotech companies of firms allegedly collaborating with Beijing's military. Okay, well, we can get to talking about that article. And here's a question that I came up with is, will the potential restrictions on collaboration with Chinese biotech companies affect partnerships and investments in the biotech industry? So what's going on there? How can people prepare? And who is it affecting? Here we go.
Renee, I don't know if you wanted to start off there.
Sure, no problem. I did a little research, but I've read that the funding originally for this industry was $1.2 billion in 2015, and in 2021 it increased to $19.3 billion. So you can see that there's been a lot of investments in this industry for the biotech. Recently, it has gone down, but I mean, I think collaborating with China is a sticky wicket. You know, there's, there's certain benefits to it, obviously, but the negatives are, our data, our genetics, our technology. So we need to collaborate with them in a way where they are going to be honest with us, which can be interesting.
Well, and it's one of these things again. China keeps coming back, and there's accusations. If you recall, we have talked about this before, where the U.S. and the UK launched allegations, some warrants for people's arrest and sanctions against some Chinese companies that were doing cyber espionage. Well, they're taking it on into the biotech industry here, where the concern is, and this is from the House members. Now, keep in mind, this is on the U.S. News and World Reports where this article is. And there is not an official government action yet, but and it's bipartisan. So the Republican chair and the ranking member from the Democrat Party are jointly raising this issue, saying that there are a couple of Chinese biotech companies that need to be put on the sanction list. Plus, there needs to be a scenario here to say, take action to not do business with these people. It appears that there is some evidence that this committee has come across that indicates that biotechnology that could be misused, if you will, for generating bioweapons, if you will, for the military, for the Chinese military in this case, is out there, and that's why they're raising this issue up. What concerns me, though, as this goes along, so right now, there's just another accusation here where it seems like the Chinese government is involved in another type of issue where they're trying to get more and more technology from the U.S., from doing things here. They're not transparent with it. But it's just another accusation in the list of this. What concerns me, though, is the House members are having to go public with raising this issue up to try and get the Biden administration to do something. It's really a shame. And folks, I mean, they go back and forth. This is a bipartisan issue here. There's concern over this. And it's like, well, as long as people are comfortable and get whatever they want to get, then they, it's like, they downplay the risk. This is one of those things where, folks, when there's a problem and they have launched and they've developed their weapons or whatever, it's too late then. So you got to take action now and be wise about it. So anyway, that said, we'll have to watch this, but it's one of those things I would, if I were an importer, exporter, or whatever, even though these two companies are not necessarily on the restricted party or denied parties list yet, the action is to go to the U.S. News and World Report on this, and we'll have a link in our Annik, you do such a great job in pulling this stuff together, is take a look at that and then consider that if you're in the biotech industry, healthcare industry, whatever, and you do any kind of business with these folks directly or indirectly through your suppliers and all that, you better check it out, because I can assure you that that's at some point it's going to come down the line and you'll have to do it anyway.
Yeah, and Andy, I read that the Biotrade Association is splitting with that Wuchi, I don't know how to pronounce it, that as a major contractor in March. So they're making changes, even the associations.
All right. Well, moving on to the next article, which we have two articles about China. I promise, if there's nothing happening in the trade industry, it's China. Like, there's literally nothing really happening. It's just China, 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 China. Jesus Christ. But here we are, Brexit. Brexit import charges could lead to higher food prices. Well, that's bad because the prices seem already so high in England right now. So trade groups in the UK are warning that the imposition of post-Brexit import charges on EU food and plant products may lead to higher food prices. So the charges set to be implemented from April 30th, which is pretty soon, are intended to cover border inspections and biosecurity measures. But trade groups argue that they could significantly burden small and medium-sized importers. So, how can groups and businesses what can they do to mitigate the potential increase in food prices resulting from these charges? Like, what can they do, especially if they're wanting to import? Like, what do they have to do, budget wise, or what's the next step for them?
Renee, I'll defer to you.
The only thing I can come up with is consolidation. I mean, there's not a really easy way out of this. But what I think is interesting is they're also indicating it's going to improve their biosecurity, which is the article we just left. So they're concerned too, obviously, in the UK.
Well, here, let me jump in on this. Is that this is a non-tariff trade barrier type move. They what the issue here is, and again, from the Guardian, is that in this article in the Guardian, they're saying fees of up to 145 pounds on EU animal and plant products through Dover, and Folkestone. Those are the 2 ports that are listed. I don't know if it's across the entire UK, but at least those 2 ports. That going through there is that, what's the fee for? And Renee, you just mentioned they're saying it's for the biosecurity. The issue comes into where, well, what about the other fees associated with doing entries and inspections and all those kinds of things? So this is an added
border inspections also.
Yeah, well, and it's just, okay, so what about the ag inspection fees? What about the other import fees? It's like all of a sudden, here's a way to take another fee. So that's where I'm having the issue, is that to our UK listeners, obviously this UA produce folks and whatnot are saying, this is not fair, or it's going to drive up prices. Yeah, it's I don't know if it's going to be a significant amount. I don't know if it's 145 pounds per package, per shipment, whatever, per entry. There's some details in this, but bottom line is there needs to be some kind of accountability with the UK government in one respect. Now, on the other side of this, let me just say this is maybe somewhat retaliatory, because UK products going to Europe have suffered under the EU rule, if you will, in that there have been added fees tacked on to UK products. So I see this as more of a retaliatorial type scenario there, and that's why.
Yeah. That's their fault for leaving.
Well, but here's the problem, is the whole issue behind it. And a lot of folks, there's some, depending on who you talk to, Brexit is a success. Others say Brexit was a failure. The issue has been where it is you've been losing your sovereignty as a country is one thing. Second thing is that regarding at least the UK, and I've heard complaints in other countries in Europe, is that if you will, the European Union, has not really benefited the average person out on the street. All it's done is added cost and added taxes and added fees. It's not really been a benefit in many aspects. So that's some of the things, in looking at it now, intra-European type things there's supposedly a easier, more relaxed way and less duties and taxes in one respect. On the flip side of it, why is it that the average person in each of the countries continues to see inflated prices on all kinds of goods? Under the guise of the European Union, the guise of the UK and whatnot. So this is one of those where it would be interesting to have that discussion to say, what can happen from it. But the added fees just seem to keep being added on there. And in this particular case, the UK government is allowing this out of the 2 ports. I don't know if it's the 2 port authorities or if it's the UK government itself doing it or what, but it seems to be isolated at this point to 2 ports, and go from there. The only other way to look at it to minimize your cost, increase your competition. In other words, allow for more goods to come in, maybe duty free or whatever. That's fine. They still have to deal with the fees, but competition is what truly the market drives down cost, if you will, in that, not government.
All right. Yeah.
Also, maybe they could
go ahead.
I was going to say, there's probably, like here, we legislate, we go to Congress, we start committees. So I don't know if the UK, Andy, do you know if they have any importer committees, associations that could?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of things in there that the trade associations and whatnot. And actually, it'd be interesting, Annik. The ICPA Dublin conference is coming up. It would be interesting to see, what people are saying from that perspective of the European conference, and see, the topics and see who's involved in some things from a lobbying perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they have something similar to COAC like we do in the U.S.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see like how different it is from, I don't know, from this side of the world, because I mean, EU and American views are very differently, like in a lot of aspects.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I know from history that trade is highly respected field in Europe, from what I used to know. When I started out in the 90s, they're like, what are you guys? But we would talk to the UK and they're like, no, we're a recognized industry.
Yeah. I mean, I know trade's
Europe,
big
yeah.
here, but
yeah, it's definitely more. Yeah.
I'll update you once I'm back.
All right.
But let's jump into the last one, which again is about China, unfortunately. So China firmly opposes U.S. trade barriers. So basically, China has strongly opposed to the U.S. National Trade Estimate report, categorizing it as a country of primary concern. Yeah. The Chinese Commerce Ministry refuted these accusations, asserting that they lacked factual evidence and criticized the U.S. for not abiding by the World Trade Organization rules. Why is this just funny? I mean, it's just funny when they say anything like that they oppose of the United States, because they seem to not run things in a very good manner anyways.
Well, I can tell you, surprise, surprise, but Renee, again, I'm going to defer to you on this one, because I'll probably have a comment that somebody's going to get their knickers in a knot on this one.
Yeah,
this one irritates, chasts my backside a little bit, but go
well,
ahead.
There's arguments on both sides, like you always say, Andy. I mean, I've read China's our third largest export market. So when you think about it that way, we're getting a lot of sales out of the U.S. into China, jobs. They've employed, I read 1 million jobs because of our exports to China. But, I used to work for Raytheon, and there's some serious technology, defense, security issues. They're subsidizing their companies, their state-owned companies. They do a lot of currency manipulation. So we can come up with 3 or 4 positives and negatives for trading with China, right? I mean,
there is positives. You have to say, it's money.
Yeah. Right.
Jobs.
Well, here's where I'd go with it is, first off, China is complaining about the U.S. in the complaints against China and whatnot. Surprise, surprise, they're fighting against it, or they don't like it. That duh. However, that said, what's again on this one, China is utilizing the WTO. They reference WTO. U.S. should follow the WTO. Well, Sam Hill, dadgummit China, you do the doggone same thing. Open up your frickin' markets to become a member of the WTO. What is the WTO? World Trade Organization. Part of that is to agree to lowering tariffs. They want open access to the U.S. market. They want open access to other countries around the world. And yet, when people try, listen, it happens from Canada, from U.S., from Australia, from Italy, from Europe, all kinds of whatever. You send products from your countries into China.
That got you upset. Andy, got you.
I'll tell you.
I'm with you, Andy. I'm with you.
This is bad.
This is one of those things that I'm telling you, it chasts my backside on it from a standpoint that folks keep talking a good game. China is like, oh, no, you shouldn't do anything, and they should be using the WTO rules. Well, it goes both ways. And all I'm looking for is a fair access. And I'm of the opinion, I got to tell you, China, you don't open up your markets, then we close down our markets to you. And other countries around the world look at it, and one other comment, and I'll shut up here. For every $1 billion of trade, that equates to 10,000 jobs in the U.S. So the one thing that I will say is that with this trade imbalance and things of that nature, we have sacrificed U.S. jobs for cheap imports. Now, as long as the markets are open out there, then, we'll generate more jobs, manufacturing jobs, supply chain jobs, import, export jobs, all those kinds of things come into play. And so the issue I have with this is that if China were more open, then we still have to compete on price, cycle times, quality, and all of that, just like they have to do into the U.S. and other countries. So the point being is that they need to open up their markets and play fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't respect it at all. I mean, I read an article that they placed retaliatory tariffs on Australian wine because Australia wanted to investigate their COVID-19 issue. There wasn't a COVID-19 investigation. So if you don't do what they want, they shut their doors, like you said, or retaliatory. And I mean, look at, there's other countries in the world doing this, but China's known for significant forced labor. I mean, I don't know. I've been to China. It's a wonderful country in many ways, great history. But I don't, the people I talk to and work with, it's not democracy. You know what I mean? It's a difficult environment and they're used to authoritarian ways. And I think they joined the WTO just to use it as leverage for.
Well, I mean, for years they went in there and they got in under the Clinton administration. And there was a big push to try and get them in during that scenario, that time frame. Same thing with Russia at the time. And it came in to become a member of the World Trade Organization. Again, you are to open up your markets, you to look at lowering your tariffs. They've not done either one of those. And yet everybody wants to play around with this. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't fair. If you're going to play fair, okay, fine. If you're not, if you're going to allow them to basically not play fair in this international trade, then you're sacrificing jobs in your own country to get whatever you want to get from China. And that's where I have a problem.
Well, the WTO, as you know, is failing miserably, but they need to get a little stronger and be a arbitration party, I think, for some of these issues.
Yeah. So actually, a fun fact, when you brought up Russia, you know how Putin is just intense, crazy. I started watching a documentary on Netflix, and I didn't know Putin actually speaks German and he has lived here. Isn't that crazy?
Oh.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Anyways, that's not my fun fact. My fun fact, do you know when America started trading with China? Like what year?
It was, Nixon opened, it was after Nixon, but it was under the Ford administration, and Nixon was the one that helped open up China.
Late 70s.
So the year around.
I thought it was the early 70s, early to mid 70s, about 74.
1784.
1784. Oh, you're talking at the very beginning.
She's talking tea.
I'm talking early.
Which, by the way, they have great green tea.
It says August 28th, 1784, the United States formally entered in the China trade.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Anyways.
That's probably true.
That's a fun
fact. There was a couple
for
boats that sailed over here from China.
It was the Empress of China sailed up the Pearl River and into the Guangzhou.
Well, it was all right. Back in that is we had resolved the, if you will, the Revolutionary War. It was after that, and we had officially been recognized as a country that had viable products to offer. That was one that China was a mysterious country at the time to the Western world, and it was just beginning to open up. And I'm trying to think, it may have been the Ming Dynasty that was the emperor at that time that allowed it to open up. I can't. I'm not that astute on history, but yeah, it was
good fun fact, Annik. I love it. You got us.
It's not really fun. It's just because clearly it brought a lot of issues with it.
Yeah, right.
Here and now. Anyways, that concludes our roundup. Thank you, Renee, for joining us today. I think you made some really good points. Hope you enjoyed it, you listeners. I'm talking to you. And yeah, we are done. I hope you have a great week.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.